Hi everyone, today I'm going to be showing you how to plan a project with Loxone. We're going to take an example two-bedroom bungalow as our reference point. As you can see the floor plan here, and we're going to be using this to calculate the devices and the hardware that we're going to need for our Loxone project within Loxone Config. So to get started, we're going to go head over into Loxone Config and we're going to click on Project Planning. We'll just hit OK to this, and we'll be greeted by the first page where we are prompted to enter the customer information, the author details, the project name, and ensure the currency and language for the products are correct. So we'll start off with the customer name. Now, this isn't vitally important for project planning, but this is transferred into the configuration file later on once we have installed the project. So I would recommend putting this in straight away. So I'm going to do this for my colleague, and we're going to take the example that he lives here at our office. Pop in our postcode and the town, village, or city. And then author details. This is really important so that if your customer needs to contact you down the line, should they want to make any additions or changes to their Loxone installation, it's important that they have your contact details as the installer to reach back out to you. Now, if you put these author details in, again, this is transferred into the configuration file, but also can be shown within the Loxone app. So I'll pop these details in here. So I'd recommend putting in your company name, and if you've got multiple people within your company that could be doing this installation and configuration, I would also pop a hyphen there with the person's first name. Then you put in the telephone number that you would like your customer to use to contact you, and an email address. Now, this could be a support at email address, or it could be a direct email address. And then your website. Fantastic. Now, we of course want to display prices. This is so that we can get a pass list at the end and generate a quote for our customer. You can automatically save the project file as we go, and we need to ensure that the currency and the language for the products that we're specifying is correct. So in my case, we've set it to British pounds and pulling from the EN UK web shop. We then hit next. Now here under the global pre-selections page, this is where we set some settings or some parameters that will be generally correct for our project. So we're always going to start off with selecting the type of mini server we're using. So if we hit this drop down here, we've got the option for mini server Go, or mini server compact. Now in this situation, we know that we only have a two-bedroom bungalow. So I think in this case, the mini server compact is perfectly at home for this installation. So we'll choose the mini server compact because it has tree, it has air, and it has tree turbo. So we have all the different technologies that we need within a smart home in this case. Now, when it comes down to controls, this is the type of switches you would like to use in each room. So, of course, you could have a combination of white and anthracite. You might have a touch pure in one room and a normal touch in the other room. And perhaps you might have some touch pure flexes in some other spaces. But also, we've got to take into account that this could be a new installation where you're running cable, or it's a retrofit, so you're having to use Loxone Air. So you here can select what the general uniform device would be throughout the project. So in my case, I'm going to leave this as the touch tree, but my personal preference is anthracite. If you're not sure what color the customer will prefer at this point in time, don't worry because the price is the same. It just gives you an idea towards the end. Now for lighting. Here we can choose between some Loxone light fittings, so the Loxone spot, the ceiling light, or some of the ceiling spots. But also you'll see we have the option here for some 10 amp or 16 amp relays if we're doing switched lighting, or the 230 volt dimmable output if you're doing some mains dimming with third-party light fittings. You also have the option for some daily lighting. Now, if you're not doing lighting in this project, you can just select none. And then when it goes through to the different stages in the project planning process, lighting won't automatically be added. In my case, we're going to go for some switched lighting. Now for shading, in this project, we're not going to be doing shading from the get-go. It might be something that the customer looks at down the line, and we're going to actually cable for it. But in terms of installing it initially, it's not going to happen. So I'm just going to scroll down and select none. Now for heating, I'm aware that this bungalow is going to have wet underfloor heating. Therefore, I'm going to go for the valve actuator tree. If you have a combination of underfloor heating and some radiators, if on the radiators you use the valve actuator air, which would be our general recommendation, so you don't have cable coming out of the wall, I would primarily put valve actuator tree if you do have underfloor heating, and then manually change it to air as we get to those rooms, perhaps upstairs. If it's primarily radiators or only radiators, that's when I would change it to valve actuator air. Now for door and window monitoring, I'm not going to be adding door and window monitoring initially at the initial planning stage. Again, the customer might add this down the line, but what I do know is they're going to have access control. So in the one area where we've got the front door, perhaps I might also do it for the back door. I will add a wired door and window contact going into a digital input, and we'll look at that as and when. So I'm just going to select none. Now for music, I would like music in a few rooms. So I'm going to select the Quadroll Install 7 with backbox for suspended ceiling. So this will add both the speaker and the relevant backbox that I will need for each speaker. Then when it comes to using some dimmable lighting with the 24 volt or the 12 volt, so this could be extra low voltage, we have the option to either go for the RGBW dimmer tree that stays in the panel. We could go for the compact dimmer, which is local to where the lighting would be, or you could go down the air route. Now, in this case, I'm going to go for the compact dimmer route. Then I can run tree cable to those areas that I'm going to run some extra low voltage lighting, and then put the 2-core or 5-core flex, depending on the lighting from the compact dimmer. Now, for the airbase, we of course have the airbase built into the mini server compact. If we, for whatever reason, went over the 128 air devices that the airbase on the mini server compact can take, if we need an additional airbase, do we go for an airbase extension, or are we going for the tree to air bridge? In this case, I'm going to go for tree to air bridge. Now, finally, the last global pre-selection option we have here is the presence detection. So by default, we've selected the flush-mounted presence sensor tree in white, which is what I'm going to stick with because we would like to go for flush-mounted presence sensors and the ceilings are white. Therefore, we're going to go for the white sensor. Then we hit next. Now you can see as default, we are presented with a list of rooms which are commonly found in a residential setting. We're doing a smart home, so I could use exactly these. You can see here we have a lounge, a living room, a kitchen dining, an open plan space, 2 bedrooms, a bathroom and a hallway. And you can see here actually we've already got the majority of these rooms and more. But as a general recommendation, to make sure we don't miss anything and we correctly account for all of the bits of hardware that we need in this project, I always start off by removing all of the rooms. I then navigate to the whole house room and have a look to see what is already in there, what I should remove, and what I should then add. So you can see there's nothing in shading, access, security, accessories. I'm now just going to remove these 2 items, the cooler service, and now I can get started. So we know that we're not going to be having any shading, so I don't need to worry about adding anything in this category. We are going to have access control, so the intercom and the NFC code touch at the front door, but those devices are outside, so I'm going to have a separate room called outside. Again, don't need anything for security. And then when it comes to accessories, also not necessarily. Every mini server comes with a 30-day trial for the caller service and the weather service. So I always like to offer that to the customer first to see if they like it, if they see the added benefit. And then if they want to subscribe for 1 year or 10 years, they can make that informed decision themselves. But the space that I would like to add some inputs, outputs, or devices is the inputs and outputs section, because this here is where I would add the digital input for my smoke detector, the relays for any of my heating or the climate control, and generally the inputs and outputs that affect the whole installation as itself, hence why it's named whole house. Now this could also be central. So firstly, let's add the digital input, and I'm going to label this fire alarm. So this is assuming I'm integrating a third-party alarm system, so fire alarm system, and if it's triggered, it closes a contact on board and sends a 24-volt signal to Loxone to say the fire alarm has been triggered. And then we could have the speakers play a siren sound. We could even have the lights flash. I then need to add the relevant outputs for my heating. Now, in this scenario, we've got let's assume an air source heat pump, and we know that we need a switch signal, a relay, to send a call for heat. So I've added a digital output 10 amp. Now it won't be a 10 amp call for heat, well, it won't be a 10 amp load, but we just need a control signal. The mini server compact has got two 16 amp relays, and of course the relay extension has 14 16 amp relays. The system automatically assumes that we're going to use the relays on the mini server compact, and once we've exceeded those two, we then go on to the relay extension. But what's important to remember here, we're adding the individual outputs, we're not adding the extension itself. So I'm now going to put here the air source heat pump call for heat. Now, we're also likely going to have a couple of two-port valves. This could be the one for heating or the underfloor heating, and also likely one for the hot water. So I'm going to add another two for the two-port valves. So we could say CH for central heating valve. And then another output for the hot water, so HW valve. Now finally, one more that I'm going to add is for the pump that may be on the side of the manifold. Now, of course, you could connect it to the inbuilt relay on the two-port valve for the central heating, but this would then require an additional wiring center. If you do it with a relay, Loxone is your wiring center. So we're now going to enable this manifold pump. I think we're all good for now. We now need to move on to the other categories. So this could be where you add perhaps a Modbus extension or any communication extensions you may need for your installation. Perhaps you're controlling or integrating some renewable energy sources, or integrating your projector via RS-232. I would add these here under extensions. Then heading over to automation, we're going to need some tree cable. So I'm just going to add the low smoke zero halogen tree cable. 200 meters is going to be more than sufficient for the project, and press OK. So we've now done the global, the central area for the property. We now need to break it down room by room. What I generally do is I start off with the main recreational areas, so the kitchen, the dining room, and the living room. Perhaps you could include the bathroom as a recreational space, because you're generally spending longer periods of time in there if you're having a bath, for example. And then you have bedrooms, thoroughfares, and you could even have something called other. And this could be like a utility room, for example, or a storage cupboard. So let's start off with the kitchen diner. This is a recreational room. And then we need to put in the area, the square meters of the room. So here you can see these are calculated individually. So what we'll do is, because my maths is not on form today, we will do the calculation, so 6.72 square meters for the kitchen. So that's going to give us a total of 19.17 square meters for the kitchen diner. So we'll round that up to 20, and there you go. 20 is there by default, so we can leave it as is. Now you've got windows and external doors. As you can see here, as I hover over it, it says this is for calculating the number of shading and window and door contacts that we could need within this room. Now we know that we're not putting window and door contacts on every window and door, and we're not actually having shading. But we may be referring back to the project planning file and adding additional equipment to each room as we go through this planning and proposal stage with our customer. They may want to add, they may want to remove devices. So it's always beneficial to do all of these different settings and parameters now when you're initially doing the project planning, so you don't need to worry about it later. So we can see here we've got the back door, and by the looks of it, 1, 2, 3 windows. So that's a total of 4. Then we've got how many internal doors do we have, and you can see we've just got the 1 here as we enter this open plan space. This here, you can see, is used for calculating how many Loxone touch switches we need. Then finally, the heating loops. So this is calculating how many valve actuators we need. Now, if I increase the size of the room, just as an example, you can see naturally the heating loop quantity increases. If I bring it back down, it will then reduce itself. Now, if you accidentally, or you actually need to change this because you have it documented, documented that how many heating loops are in this room, that's completely fine. You can make these manual changes here. We're now going to click open. And this here is going to adopt our global pre-selections that we did earlier and put them into the room so we can begin planning this project. Let's start with lighting. So if we head over into the kitchen diner, we haven't got any lighting design. So we have the flexibility here to make our own informed recommendations. So what I would believe in this instance, we would probably have a light circuit here in the kitchen, perhaps some spots, and perhaps a light circuit here, again, spots in the dining room. We could go one step further and add another circuit for perhaps some pendants over the dining table. So that's now 3 circuits. You could then even add an RGBW dimmer for some LED strip underneath the cabinets. So here we could have up to 4 lighting circuits. So let's see how this would look within Loxone config. So you can see here by default, it's adopted our global pre-selection, so we've added 1 digital output for what is labeled ceiling lights. We know we're going to have multiple here with all different names, so I'm going to rename the first one to kitchen spots. We've then got digital output 10 amp. We can double click this again, or you can click it and press add, and we're going to label this dining spots. We're then going to do this again and call it dining pendants, or you could call them table pendants. It's really important that we label these in such a way with the correct capitalization all throughout this project planning stage to make sure that what you see here, this will also be used within Loxone config and the Loxone app. If this is done with a spelling mistake here or incorrect grammar, this will follow through into the customer's app on their phone. And if you're investing in such a system or a solution, you expect it to be perfect. So it's always important to take that extra attention to detail. Now, I would also like to add some LED strip underneath the kitchen counter to illuminate my workspace. Now, if I type in here LED strip, you can see we are presented with a list of warm white, RGBW, or tunable white options here. I would like to go for some RGBW LED strip here, and I'm going to go for splash proof considering it's in the kitchen. So I just need to double click this and you can see it adds it to my list. Now I'm going to label this the cabinet strip, or we could call it cabinet underglow. Now notice that we're adding the LED strip here, as opposed to the output that's controlling it. If we refer back a moment to the global pre-selection earlier, you'll notice that we have selected which PWM dimmer we would like to use for PWM lighting. Now the LED strip requires a PWM dimmer to work, and the planning tool already knows this, so it takes that into consideration during the planning stage. So all I need to do is add the LED strip, and at the end of project planning, it will calculate how many RGBW dimmers I need. So you don't need to worry about it. Now we're going to head over to the other categories. So shading, we don't need anything. Climate, we do. Now we've got the valve actuator tree. We don't need to name this, A, because it's not listed in the Loxone app, because the intelligent room controller is, and B, the customer's not going to see it, and the product itself is a valve actuator. We don't need to name it anything else. However, it's not necessarily installed directly in the room. It's installed elsewhere. So as you're configuring and maintaining the system, it's important that you know where to find it exactly. So these valve actuators, although it's influencing the kitchen diner, it could be somewhere else in the house, perhaps in a plant room or a cupboard. So we're going to say it's installed on the manifold. Now, when it comes to multimedia, you'll notice that we've got this auto checkbox, similar to what you may have seen here with the climate control. Now, this is calculated based on the room size that we inputted earlier. If we hover over this, you can see it's done the total area divided by 10, which has given us 2. So the 20 square meters divided by 10 has given us 2 speakers, perhaps one in the dining area, one in the kitchen area. Now I don't need to name these because it automatically adopts the room name later on, but it's important that we know the exact quantity. Now for presence detection, I would say that we need to go for the 2 options here, because we can have the dining area, want to make sure that we have some presence detection in the dining area, but also in the kitchen area as you enter, perhaps from the side or back door, and as you come into the main room. So I'm going to increase this to 2. Now the presence sensor is a presence sensor. We don't need to name it anything or say it's installed anywhere. Later on, when we come to the configuration and commissioning, we may then add installation location, so we know which one's in the dining room and which one is in the kitchen if we need to do any diagnostics later on. Then we get to controls, and this is calculated one based on us having one door going into the kitchen. So yes, I would have one switch there, but I may also go for an additional switch in the dining area so you don't have to walk back to the kitchen should an adjustment of the light level be required. Again, I'm not going to name it on this occasion, and I'll name it later on when we get to the commissioning stage, because I don't know exactly where they're going to be positioned at this point in time. There's going to be no access products or security products in the kitchen at this time, and same with accessories. So I'm going to click OK. And now I'm going to have a look at another room. So let's take the lounge, for example. So again, double click on the dots and type in lounge. It's a recreational room, and this time we've got a room size of about 16 square meters. Again, it's calculated our heating loops. How many internal doors we've got is 1. We've got 1, 2 windows and 1 sliding door. So I can increase this to 3 and click open. Now in here, I think 1 light circuit as a starting point will be sufficient. Now, I'm not sure whether this could be spots or a feature pendant or some wall lights. This is a discussion I'm going to have with the customer, but I'm going to start off with just 1 light circuit. So leaving it named ceiling lights is sufficient for now because I may change the name of these down the line. What else may I have in here? I'm certainly going to have a presence sensor so we can have some automatic lighting. Also have a touch in there because we're going to need this for monitoring the temperature as well as being a light switch, of course. I'm not going to add some speakers in here. The customer may have a separate solution for their TV, perhaps a soundbar, but we'll keep the multi-room audio for other rooms. So we'll go across, no shading. Climate, yet we've got a valve actuator. This is installed on the manifold. Then for the audio, like I said, we're going to remove this. We're assuming that the customer is going to have something like a soundbar. They can always add speakers on before we go to first fix stage. Presence detection, yes, I would like a presence sensor, and same again with a touch. Now, like what I mentioned earlier with the access control for the front door, I'm going to go back and add this to the kitchen as well. Because these are possible points of entry, I would like to monitor this as part of our security system. So I'm going to add a door and window contact to the project here. Now, when it comes to door and window contacts, you could have a couple of different options. We could go for a digital input if you have a wired version, or you have a door and window contact built into the window or the door that you get from a third-party manufacturer. If you don't, you could go down the wireless battery-powered air variant. And with this one, you can expect at least a 2-year battery life. On this occasion, I know that the sliding door being supplied by the manufacturer actually has a wired door and window contact. So I'm going to select the digital input brackets window contact. So this will just reserve a reserve an input on my mini server. So I'm just going to label this sliding door. And then I'm going to click OK. Now, as I mentioned, I'm going to go back to the kitchen, press open, and then go to security. Now, this door doesn't come with a built-in door and window contact, so we're going to add a door and window contact air and just the one, and we'll label this side door and press OK. Perfect. Now let's look at the other rooms. We've got bedroom 1 and bedroom 2. Now, although bedroom 1 may be the master or the principal bedroom, the technology that's going inside of them is going to be near enough the same, if not very similar. So the lighting, the heating, and perhaps audio. So do we need to do the same job twice? Most likely not. If we head back here, I can double click on these dots, type in bedroom 1. This is a bedroom. And then when it comes to the size of the room, we're looking about 10 square meters. Yep, more perhaps 12 square meters. We've got 1 window, that's the same with bedroom 2 as well, 1 entrance point into the room, and 1 heating loop. You'll notice that it calculates the heating loop based on the room size. However, of course, if you've got an heating engineer already involved in the project, you may know how many heating loops are going to be in this room. I'm going to hit open, and we're going to add a couple of light circuits here. So we're going to go for some spots, but also some bedside pendants. We're then going to go to climate control. We've then got a valve actuator, which is on our manifold. We're going to have 1 speaker in the bedroom as opposed to 2, because it's not that big of a space. We're going to have a presence sensor on the ceiling, And I'm not going to add a present sensor air under the bed at the moment. The customer could be offered this as an upsell later down the line. And then when it comes to controls, I would certainly like a switch by the door. Now, when it comes to switches by the bed, you could certainly add it at this stage if it has been specified. If not, a personal preference of mine is to leave that for a discussion down the line. Again, a possible upsell. You could go down using the air version of a touch or a touch pure. You could use a night light. Again, this could be a discussion we have as we get to that point. If you wire the switch and the purpose of the room changes, perhaps rather than a bedroom, it changes into a kid's nursery or a home office, you don't want to necessarily have floating switches in the middle of the wall where there's no longer a bed. So if you go down the air route, it's much easier to change. Now, when it comes to access and security, we're not going to add any further products. So just as a recap, we've got lighting, 2 circuits for this. We've got climate control. We've got a speaker. We have 1 present sensor, and we have a touch by the door. I'm going to press OK. Now, as mentioned, these are going to be even the same or similar bedroom 1 and 2. Now, I know in this example, in bedroom 1, we're going to have spots and those bedside pendants, but in bedroom 2, we're not going to have the bedside pendants because it's just going to be a spare guest bedroom. So what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate the room like so. We can hover over the create copy room icon and click it, and you can see there it automatically numbers the bedroom as bedroom 2. You can see it's copied the room type, the area, the number of doors and windows, and heating loops automatically. But we know, of course, bedroom 2 is slightly smaller, closer towards the 10 square meters. So I'm just going to correct that, although that's not going to make necessarily any difference to the heating loops at this stage. It could change something down the line should we be adding extra devices on. I'm then going to remove the bedside pendants, but otherwise everything else will remain exactly the same. Now that leaves us with 2, possibly 3 more areas we would like to control. So I'm going to start off with the bathroom. So with the bathroom, I'm going to select recreational room because this affects what the configuration does later on in terms of how presence works and the different features which are automatically added to the project. So by going for recreational room, it will also dictate the automatic pre-selections we get. Notice for the bedroom, we had a present sensor underneath the bed and also a touch next to the bed automatically added for us. Whereas in the kitchen, dining and lounge, it wasn't done for us. So that's what these room types also influence. So I'm going to hit open. Again, in the bathroom, notice at the moment we've got 1 relay for ceiling lights. Now, what I would like to do is offer a bit of a wow factor, but also considering the limited ceiling space I might have, I could have a presence sensor, some lighting, maybe a speaker. Whereas if I go for the Loxone ceiling light, this could offer us the potential to only have 1 device and have more ceiling space. So I'm going to remove the relay and I'm going to select the LED ceiling light tree in white. This has just added the 1, which is all fine. I don't need to rename it because it's called the ceiling light. Shading, I've not got any shading. The valve actuator, we've just got the one for the underfloor heating on the manifold. And I noticed there that I had forgotten to correct the room size. So let's just double check that. You can see here actually we haven't got a room measurement. So just taking an educated guess based on the size of that bath there, we're going to be looking at about 2 by 2 meters. So we're going to select 4 square meters here. So climate, that's all correct. I can now tick auto and it will all be fine. Multimedia, I would certainly like a speaker. Presence detection, I don't need one because the ceiling light has got a built-in motion sensor. And then when it comes to controls, we're going to use the Loxone Touch. Remember that because the Loxone Touch is 24 volts, it can be in zone 2 within the bathroom, so no longer do you need to put it outside the bathroom um, due to the regulations. Now, as we go through here, there's also another thing we need to take into consideration, which is ventilation. And because we are using a 24-volt light fitting, we can't naturally connect the extract fan to this light like we would conventionally. So we just need to add a relay to trigger the extract fan. And I've added this to inputs and outputs. And finally, for the bathroom, we've got we've got wet underfloor heating, but I would like to add an electric towel rail for warming and drying the towels over the summer, of course, and the winter, but not going to be impacting the climate control of the room. So I'm going to add another relay, this time a 16 amp relay because it's potentially going to be a much higher load than some of the light fittings, and I'm going to name this the towel rail. Now you may be thinking, why haven't I added this to the climate category? And that's because only the underfloor heating is going to be influencing the temperature of the room. However, the towel rail is simply just for drying and keeping the towels warm. So I'm going to hit OK. Now we've got the hallway. This is of course a thoroughfare, but also a location where you may be exiting the property. And here again, we don't have a room measurement. So again, you're going to have to take more of an educated guess. And if I take the comparison of the bathroom size and the hallway, I'm going to say we're in the realm of about 8 square meters. We have one external door being the front door. And then when it comes to internal doors, the thoroughfare doesn't really have any internal doors because these are internal doors to its respective room. But because is influencing how many Loxone touch switches we have in this area, I'm going to leave it as 1 because then it will add a switch that I could have perhaps by the front door. Okay, so let's open it up. And now when it comes to the hallway, we can label this perhaps spots. Then we're not getting shading. We do have underfloor heating, so we're going to say the valve actuator is in the manifold or on the manifold. We don't have any audio in the hallway. And then when it comes to presence detection, notice it's added a presence sensor tree white. This isn't actually the flush mounted version, so we want to correct this and change it to the flush mounted version. Okay, then with the Loxone Touch, yep, I would like one of these, and this will most likely be next to the front door, so we give the customer the triple tap functionality as they're leaving the property. Okay, and then last but not least in the hallway, we're going to add the digital input for the door and window contact. So there we go. I will label that front door. Fantastic. Now the final room and area that I would add to this file would be outside. So for outside, I would keep the front garden and the back garden and any other areas of the outside area as one room. Because you have to think about the interaction the customer will have. It's unlikely they will have a light switch for outside, etc., as a point of control. It will either be automated or via the Loxone app. Therefore, keeping it in one room in the Loxone app, it's less steps and less taps that they have to make to access these features. So I'm going to create another room and call it outside. This is other because it doesn't come under any of these other categories. We aren't going to put an area because it's infinite. We don't need to put the whole square meter area of our boundaries of our property. We don't have any doors or external doors or windows outside or any heating loops. So I'm just going to click open. Now for lighting, of course, we may have some outdoor lighting circuits. I'm going to make the assumption that we're going to have about two, perhaps one for the front garden, one for the back garden. What they are at the moment, I'm not sure, so I'm just going to add two and not worry about labeling them. We can label them later on in the configuration and commissioning stage. Again, we're not heating, so I can get rid of the valve actuator. We're not putting any speakers outside at the moment. We don't need any presence sensors either. We don't need any light switches. But then when it comes to access control, this is where I'm going to add an intercom, an NFC code touch, and the relevant peripherals. So let's add an intercom. We're going to add an NFC code touch tree in Anthracite as well. And we're going to need a double mounting bracket in Anthracite. You would have noticed that I've naturally increased the quantity for the NFC code touch here, and that would be because it's calculated via the quantity of doors or external doors that we put in the global pre-selection. But because we've set that to 0, I'm just going to manually increase that to 1. Now, for the intercom to work, I need to power it over Ethernet. It's a PoE device. Now, the customer may have a PoE switch, they may not, they may just have a normal router from their ISP. Therefore, I'm going to also allow for the provision of a PoE injector. And then the final thing for access control is the relay for controlling the front door lock. So I'm just going to search here, digital, and I'm presented with the digital I/O that's available to me. So I'm going to go for digital output 10 amp, and I'm going to label this door lock. Fantastic. There's nothing else here that I need to add. Perhaps under security, we could add the alarm siren. So they have a fully fledged security system here. Press OK. Fantastic. We have finished the allocation for each room, and we've also added all the products and devices that we really need. And this is always a basis. I would always start with the features that the customer needs and has already requested when doing the project planning, and then all of the luxuries, the added features that would be nice, the nice to haves, these can be added later on after ongoing discussions with the customer as upselling. We then can hit next, and based on the products that we have planned for, it automatically calculates the power supplies that we need. Now, with the power supply and backup, that is automatically a recommendation that we offer because the features it delivers outweigh the benefits of the other power supplies we have on offer, because it has the built-in fuses, it's got the energy monitoring, and the option to be a battery backup solution for this property. Now, in this scenario, we could be backing up the mini server, we could be backing up perhaps the access control with the NFC code touch, we could be backing up even the customer's router if they wanted to, because it's a 24-volt power supply. The ceiling light in the bathroom, because it's 24 volts, would be backed up, the audio as well. So in this scenario, the power supply and backup would work very nicely. But just so you can see, we recommend that you separate your lighting, your audio, your peripherals, so your switches, your sensors, your valve actuators, and your controls, your mini server and extensions, all individually on power supplies. And you can see here it's automatically showing us the amount of power required for these different categories. So should you need to change it from a power supply and backup, you certainly can using this information. Once you've finished, we can just press Finish Planning. We can save this file onto our computer. And let's go to my desktop. Notice it's taken the name of the project. And just as a recap, the name of the project is taken here. Now, when I filled this information out, it automatically took the project name from the customer name. If you know the name of the project, i.e. the first line of the address of the project, or there is a specific name for that property, you could use it here. Because then when the customer connects to the mini server in the Loxone app, it's presented with the name of their property as opposed to their name. Now, if we head back to this final stage here, we've saved the planning file, which you can do either here or down at the bottom. It's really important you do this so you can go back and amend the planning file as changes happen throughout this planning and proposal stage. But then when it comes to understanding the parts list and how much it's going to cost, we have the parts list option. So I'm just going to press save, and then we can hit preview. So now that the Excel spreadsheet has opened up, we can see a total list of materials that we need for this installation. It's giving us a total breakdown of what the cost will be, the total cost, also including VAT. It breaks it down by category, by room, and also explains the assignment of devices. So how many tree devices are available? We have 50 on the mini server compact and also 50 available on the intercom. We only require 26, so we have 74 spare. Does the same for air devices, the relays, and also helps you with calculating the space you require in the distribution board. Now notice we here have only got the mini server, the relevant extensions that we need, including the stereo extensions, the power supply and backup, and the relay extensions, but it hasn't included things like terminal blocks and additional ancillary hardware that you may require. If you add them to the planning file, it will also show here when it comes to calculating the space required in the distribution board. Then finally, we have the power usage. So it shows you how much how much power each product is going to use. It shows you a total, what the switch on factor would realistically be, so you can calculate a total. Fantastic. So, thank you for watching, guys. I hope this gave you a great insight on how to plan a Loxone project. Please feel free to reach out to your partner coach or us here, anyone here at Loxone, for any support or help that you need with planning your projects and proposing a solution to your customer. Again, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.